Welcome to Heart with Keisha B, the podcast that focuses on the journey of grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. Whether you're dealing with loss or life challenges, this is a podcast that you don't want to miss. I am your host, Keisha B. So take a deep breath, open your mind and your soul, and sit back as we embark on this journey together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. You know, the podcast that focuses on grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. And so if you're one of my regular listeners, thank you again for always supporting Heart to Heart with Keisha B. If you are a new listener to Heart with Keisha B, welcome. And I know this, you will be inspired, uplifted, and impacted with all the things that's going to be discussed today. So our guest today is Heidi. Heidi helps soul-driven women to break the cycle of unfulfilling relationships and attract the committed, soul-aligned love in which they deserve without chasing, fixing, or settling. So with us today, we have Heidi. Heidi, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Keisha. How are you?
I am well, thank you. So Heidi, I want to say first and foremost, thank you for being willing to come on this here show to share your story, but more so to uplift and inspire, as you said, soul-driven women. I mean, what better topic to talk about, what better insight to have, and what better spirit to have than to be willing to give back to someone else. And I'm sure whatever you're going to share today is going to make an impact on somebody's life today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy and honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me ask you a question, Heidi, before we get into the whole aspect of interviewing today. What led you to want to be willing to help other women?
Because of the pain that I went through and the transformation that I was able to go through that journey and coming out on the other side and looking back at myself, you know, just a few years ago, really it was a decade ago that I left my abusive marriage. But just looking back, just a couple of years ago, I was just like, wow, so much has happened since then. And if I could just share my message, share something that would uplift somebody else and help them think about something differently or have, you know, some inspiration to change their life in a positive direction, that's, you know, really why I wanted to share my message.
Yeah. And so I asked you that question, Heidi, because that's what this show is about, right? This show is about being able to always say, unpackage yourself, right? Take the bow off that sometimes look pretty from the outside and really share yourself, really share your deep, your transformation self with somebody else who may also be sitting in that space thinking there's nobody who understands, or there's nobody here that's helping me or willing to help me, right? But here on this show, that's what I strive for, is to be able to help people, not just women, but just all kind of people. But on this particular episode today, as you stated, we're going to talk about how do we help those soul-driven women who sometimes feel like they have no hope, no one understands them, and they just don't know how to make a life shift. And so as we get started, Heidi, I want you to sort of go into who is Heidi? What was Heidi's childhood like to even get her to where she is today?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll keep it short. But yeah, it really started from a really young age. Just looking back and growing up, I had, like I like to say, it's like it was stable but chaotic. My family had, just regular jobs. My dad, my mom had an office job, and but it was really a dysfunctional family because of the alcoholism that overtook our household. So they were able to keep the house stable because what I say is they're functional alcoholics, but really it was just a feeling of emotional, chaotic, like roller coaster all the time because I didn't know how they were going to react to me, next. And so a lot of stability, a lot of inconsistency, which I can now see like carried into my adult.
Yeah. Did anybody on the outside know that Heidi was going through these things? I heard you say, my parents was functional, things look good, but could the outside people tell that something could have been wrong within your home?
My family members knew, like it wasn't physically abusive, but it wasn't physically abusive, but it was like definitely emotionally abusive. So like my family members knew, but it wasn't seen that so severe, like anyone needed to intervene. So the joke, I guess, in the family was I was like Cinderella. And so basically I was just like, because I had a younger sister, I have a younger sister. And so she was like the good one. And then I was like the bad one, so to speak. And so there was a lot of differences in how we were treated. And so I feel like, yeah, that just kind of created this lack of this belief that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy enough for love, and having, just being me and existing and loving and being worthy of love.
So I know oftentimes in homes, right, when there's an older sibling and a younger sibling, there's always a lot of comparisons, right? And I'm going to use the word that I just heard you use, which was the word bad. Was that something that your family placed that label on you as a sense of comparing you to your sibling? Or is that something that you internalized to believe that you were bad because that's what you thought you were?
Both. It was like, why do you always got to be so bad? Why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be good like your sister? And, she's doing all these things. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing so bad. So that I was seeking some attention and I was seeking fulfillment and love from my providers. And so I think that caused me to act out. And so then I got titled, bad. But then, yeah, I did form the belief that if I was bad, I wasn't worthy of love because I couldn't get the love that I was craving as a child.
Right. How did it show up in school? Did it show up in school with any behavior issues?
No, it wasn't any behavior issues. What really, I think, transpired for school is just having really low self-worth and low self-esteem, which really impacted my ability to make and keep friends, which really hurt. So it was just like, I was pretty much like, I could connect with people, like individual, how they cliques in school. Like I would connect with people like in their clique, but I wouldn't ever feel like I could be a part of one or a group. I found more solitude by myself.
Did you feel oftentimes that you may have been judged, even though people may have not been judging you, just based upon, like you say, the low self-esteem that you have within yourself?
Yeah, I felt like I was constantly being judged. I was definitely insecure as a kid. I just felt so awkward. I felt really misunderstood. Like it was hard for me to make connections with people and form relationships. So I felt like I was constantly being judged.
And I asked that question, Heidi, because I have kids myself, and I have a young child who's 15. But he and I, we talk sometimes, and I think sometimes even with himself, he tends to have this misbelief about himself and this vision about himself that nobody on the outside sees. And it's not to say that he's in any type of trauma currently in his home, but there has been trauma in his home of losing a parent and just life shifting, And so I only ask that question because I think so often that when you look at low self-esteem, that one has a feeling about themselves that other people may not see or feel about that person, but it's hard to convince that individual that, hey, no one else sees you that way because your self-esteem is so low at that point that all you know is what you feel.
Yeah. It's like a veil of, it's just like, it feels like it's only me. And then I'm feeling a certain way. And it just feels like being misunderstood, I guess, or just not. I guess it would just be misunderstood.
Makes perfect sense. And so as we talk a little bit about what your life looked like in a home, as you stated, you had functional parents who were alcoholics. Other people may have known many family members. You were compared, whether it was voluntarily or involuntarily, to your younger sibling. But as we talk about what dysfunction is, right? And as we talk about that your home could have been dysfunctional, even if other people didn't see that, just based upon what you've stated, what was your perception as a kid of what love and stability was during your childhood?
That I had to prove my worth or earn love, that I had to do something to be loved. So like my dad would give me some acknowledgement, for doing something. Like I didn't seem to get his attention until I was doing something that made him happy, And so then I had this belief like, okay, I've got to earn love.
That's tough. Because you just got me thinking, right? Because I know I don't know personally because I lost my father at a young age, but I know the importance of a father and a daughter relationship. And I know what unconditional love is, and I know what it's supposed to feel like. And so here's my question for you. As you began to try to please your dad, because that's what I heard you say, is that you wanted to do something to make him happy. How did that show up later in your life of trying to validate who you are, trying to find love? And did that love resemble what you were looking for in your dad?
Yeah, it definitely affected my relationships going forward because I was always trying to prove my worth and prove that I was worthy of being loved and that I could do enough to be loved. And so when I was 17, I ran away from home. It just was to the point where it was so much chaos and emotional, it was emotionally just too much for me to take anymore, that I just decided to leave. And I didn't really know where I was. I mean, I knew where I was going to go, but I the story in of itself is pretty crazy. But I met my boyfriend, and he was online, and so I was 17, and I had never met him in person. But I guess I was at this point of just like, I'm so over my life at home that I'm willing to go seek something better, even if I don't exactly know what that is, you know. And so I had met this person. He had led me believe, like, you know, I could be at his house and move in. He was 17 too, and so like moved in with his family in Southern California, and they took me in and stuff, and it was definitely a emotionally abusive relationship. I know now that he had taken advantage of that because I did seek validation from him to feel loved and worthy. And so I would just sacrifice all, like myself, everything about myself, I would sacrifice. I was making sure that everything I was doing was to make him happy, that he was comfortable, he was taken care of, that he was, you know, he was happy ultimately, just in whatever facet that had been. And I realized that I was trying to show and prove myself to him to say, hey, I'm worthy of being loved. But, you know, he was a narcissist. And so he definitely was taking advantage of that. And so I kept thinking, like, if I do more, if I give more, if I love him harder, he'll love me, he'll treat me better, he'll fulfill my, you know, my love cup or whatever. And it never did happen.
In this cycle that I hear you speaking of, was there ever a time that even though he may not exhibit all the qualities of your dad, or your dad didn't exhibit all the qualities of your boyfriend, did you ever find yourself comparing the two?
I don't remember consciously comparing the two of them. No.
Okay. Because the reason I asked that question is because I heard you say that when you were in your home, you were seeking validation, you were seeking different things. And then I hear you say you got into this relationship and it seemed like the same thing, trying to find your self-worth. Did you see some comparisons in regards to that in what you left versus what you had went into?
I did not. No, I didn't make any connection about that at all until later on when I was doing healing work. That I realized that.
Yeah. And so the reason I asked you that, thank you for stating that, is because I think far too often when people, right, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, when we leave one situation, the vicious cycle that happened, right? And when you were in the heart of it, we really don't see it, right? We're still trying to find ourselves in a moment of chaos. And it's like you said, I think earlier, there's almost like a veil over you that you have a difficult time seeing that, wait a minute, I got to release myself from this. I have to find a better way out. And what I hear you saying, it wasn't until you begin to heal to where you was able to see the similarities of the different, you know, stages of where you had come from, where you had been, and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about life thereafter. So you run away from home, you move into a home with, like you said, someone whom you didn't know, but you start to know, like, wait a minute, this ain't it. All right, this ain't what I want. How long did it take you to get to that point before you made a decision to do something different from that situation?
It was, well, we joined the Army together. And so I was just at that point of being like, okay, I'm living with his family. I'm 17. I'm working a Jack in the Box. I'm trying to, you know, get some income, but still, like, I don't feel like this is I'm not doing enough. He wanted to join the Army, and I was encouraging him to do that. And then he was asking me, like, what are you going to do when I'm gone? And I was just like, I'll join too. And he's like, what? So like, yeah, like I don't have anywhere else to go. Like, I'm not going to sit here and load off your parents. Like, I'm not going to, I don't feel like I'm responsible enough to go and have, a house and all this. So I just was just like, I'm just going to join the Army. And so then I did. And then we got married quickly thereafter, so we could be put at the same duty station. And then we just lived that life for a while. And then I got out of the Army, and then he got out of the Army, and then we started our life. And so altogether, it was 11 years that we were together. And then we had a beautiful daughter. And towards the end of our relationship in September of 2014, he became physically abusive, and he became very traumatic. And so I ended up just throwing caution to the wind and just saying, this is enough. I don't know what my next step is, but I know that I don't want to be in here anymore. I don't want to be dealing with this anymore. And I grabbed her, and I took just a backpack of some essentials, and I literally left, and we went to a women's shelter where we stayed for 4 months, and I worked to just make a better life for us. And I didn't know what that meant exactly. I just knew that I'd rather be on the streets than living with one more second of what I was dealing with. And I didn't want my daughter growing up thinking that that's how she was supposed to be treated. And I definitely didn't want her seeing me treated that way. So that was my motivator, my daughter, to be able to get me out of that. Because I think if I didn't have her, even if it did turn physically abusive, I don't know how long I would have been able to stay. I don't think I would have had that within me to say, okay, when enough is enough. I feel like I would have kept making excuses.
I understand. First, let me say thank you for serving our country. Greatly appreciated. I think sometimes it is a job that some of us as civilians don't really understand what it means to truly sacrifice yourself, sacrifice your life for the better good of all folks. And so I want to say thank you for doing that, even though, like you say, you didn't know what you was going to do. You didn't know why, what you was going to do with your life, but you did it you did it. And I think that's what also helped give you the strength to keep fighting for what was best for you. And like you said, what was best for your daughter. So thank you for your service. So as you talk about Heidi, you said, looking at your daughter saying, this cycle has to stop. Like, I don't want this to be something that my daughter believes is okay. Tell us about living in a shelter, somewhere that's unfamiliar, that have, more rules, that have women that you don't know, but for the sake of saying we're starting over, but it's all unfamiliar to you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a very tumultuous shift to go from my own comfortable home into a home where I was now a guest and surrounded by a lot of other people I didn't know, and having to follow rules again. Like, I was in the Army. It was so strange. And I actually didn't even make that connection until right now, but it was very interesting because I remember getting into the house that night, and we were shown to a room, and it was in the basement of a 3-story home. This house was kind of falling apart, and the room smelled like it was damp, and it was like moldy smelling. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, this does not feel clean to me. But at that moment, I didn't feel like I had any other choice. I felt like I needed some roof over my head for me and my daughter. And we slept on the bed in the room. It was just lined with bunk beds. And so it was very uncomfortable. But yeah, and then just, trying to just navigate that, like every day, I kind of just woke up and was like, what do I do today to make myself, get myself ahead? I didn't sleep for 3 nights. For the first 3 nights I was there, I couldn't even sleep. And she was, 1.5. And so she was just walking around the house, but I couldn't leave her be because I didn't know what other people would leave behind there. And so I just had to hover. And so I was on this constant guard. I could never let myself just relax because I was like, I just need to be in this protective mode nonstop, Mm-hmm. And I just knew that every day was just how can I do this better? How can I, I leaned on my resources. Thankfully, I'm a veteran. And so I had some veteran, just getting into therapy. That was really helpful. And, but otherwise it was just like having them provide, food. They would bring food from the food bank and stuff. And then having a community refrigerator and stuff. And so everybody would have a duty that they had to do every day to contribute to maintaining the house. And I remember the refrigerator, so I can be considered a neat freak or clean freak, especially with like the refrigerator, bathroom, things like that. And so I opened up the refrigerator, and I remember it just looked like a biohazard. There was just like old spoiled food. It just was disgusting. And I just remember thinking, like, I can't put my food in here. I can't put my daughter's food in here. This is disgusting. So I just was like, okay, I'm just going to clean it. And I literally just pulled everything out of there. And all the women were like looking around at me like in awe, and like, why are you doing that? And some people got mad because some of the stuff I had thrown away was some of their stuff, but it's just like, I couldn't tell if it was clean or not, or old or whatever. Right. But by the end of it, it made me feel much more comfortable. So that was like me, like contributing in a way that made me feel like, okay, like I can start to feel safe here. But yeah, it was different. It was really, really a different kind of experience.
And so let me ask you a question, Heidi, because you brought up something, and as you was talking, I started to think, if you were to speak to someone right now that's in a domestic violence relationship, because someone could be listening to this episode right now, and we know how the cycle is, right? We know that sometimes that men or women that are in domestic violence relationships, it's challenging to leave, right? For many different reasons. There's so many different layers of the why one would want to leave, but have not left. What would be your words of advice or encouragement to that listener today, if he or she were listening and they were in a domestic violence relationship and they did not have a daughter to lean upon to give them the strength to leave?
I would say that you got to put your self-worth, like you have to know that you are worthy of love. Like, it's what it comes down to is love. Like, you have to know that you're worthy of love and that you deserve to live the life that you want to live. You deserve to live in happiness. You deserve to live in health. You deserve to live in, just joy. And if you're feeling like you are at this point where you want to go, but you're scared to go, I would say you need to go. That's your soul calling you and telling you you need to rise and you deserve more out of life. And it can be really scary, but you just got to make the leap. And I will say though, like you have to kind of do it like with a plan, because they say like leaving can be one of the most dangerous times to leave. So don't just jump at like, I'm just walking out the door right now, like come up with a plan, like a secret plan. And then there's also resources in the community for advocates, women, men, domestic violence advocates that will help you, guide you, kind of give you some resources, do it in secret to make sure that you're safe, because everybody just knows how leaving can be, and just emotionally and then physically what can come with that. So just say that you need to make sure that you are taking care of you and that you deserve to be happy and experiencing a life you love.
So here's the flip side to this, Heidi. I don't know how much support you had in regards to friend base. Like, I don't know if you had friends in your life during this time, but I know oftentimes when individuals are in domestic violence relationships, that those on the outside, right, often think that it's easy to leave. Girl, you need to leave. You don't need to be treated that way. And rightfully so, the person is speaking from a place of love, but they're also sometimes speaking from a place of the unknown. Right. So if you were also to speak to someone who is, I'm going to use these words because sometimes these are the feelings that one get. I'm tired of talking to this person because obviously they're not going to leave. I'm wasting my time. Right. They must really want to be in a relationship, because if they didn't, they would have left by now. What would you tell that outside person who just don't understand what it's like behind these four walls?
It seems easy looking from the outside in, but just know that that person's world is more difficult than you could understand. And it's more than just leave. No, it comes down to a cycle. It comes down to psychology and emotional. Literally, it comes down to your emotional attachment because the way that we can become accustomed to feeling loved, and even if it is unhealthy, we become accustomed to that. And so that's what our body is used to. So if we're trying to detach from that, it becomes very difficult to try to pull ourselves away from that type of living situation. And so just have compassion. The more understanding you can be, the better off you're going to be able to connect with that person. Because I know that anybody that said, oh, you just need to leave, oh, you don't deserve this. Like, it felt like a wall was coming up, because I was just like, but I love him. And they would just be like, but that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, well, maybe, just seek some understanding, and you'll get a lot farther, and you may be able to build that connection to be able to have that trust, so they can help, or maybe they can rely on you, or for some guidance or something like that, to help them get connected in the community, because it's probably not going to be them being able to get connected to the community, because of, a lot of times people are in those abusive situations and their computers being monitored, their phones are being monitored. So if they're trying to search, how to get out of an abusive relationship, it's kind of difficult to do that. So I would just say build that bridge and just have some understanding and some compassion, and try to just really be a friend instead of trying to be judgmental about the situation.
Thank you for that. I'm a therapist by trade. That's what my education is in. And I've had clients before that have been in domestic violence relationships. And I've also had those who may come and talk about somebody else in a domestic violence relationship. And one of the things I often say alongside of what you said is that individual would need you more when he or she leave that relationship than what you think they need you now. Because once they leave, that's when the reality sets in, that they're going to need the additional support. They're going to need the ear to listen to. They're going to need the shoulder to cry on. I get that it can be a little bit hard to accept during the moment of the chaos. But like you say, if you're not in this situation, you're not going to understand. And to give responses of you need to leave or all these different things doesn't help the individual when they're going through it. It only makes it worse for the individual, because they're going through enough. They're trying to figure their life out. They don't need someone else trying to add additional stressor to them during a moment that's already chaotic. So Heidi, I'm going to go back for a second. I'm not going to dismiss the fact that you talked about your beautiful daughter and how she was an inspiration to you. But tell me from your mother's perspective, the importance of breaking the cycle and providing her a healthy environment. Tell me, what did that feel like for you to know that you had the ability to say, this can't happen, right? I can't bring my daughter up in a cycle of dysfunction. Tell me about that. Like the feeling that you got to know that you really had it to do.
She witnessed, there was a situation where we were having an altercation and he threw my head into the wall. And as I was pulling my head out and I looked over and she's sitting there looking at us, her innocent eyes. And I was just like, she can't see this. Like, she doesn't deserve to see this. That was literally like, boom. That was like that moment. And I have chills right now, like going back to that moment. Like, that was the moment that I was just like, no, this cannot happen. Like, she cannot think that this is right. She can't think that this is how she's supposed to be treated. Because I mean, it was like, wasn't even about me. It was just the mama bear instinct came out and was just like, I got to protect this little kid. Like, she's so innocent and she just deserves to have that love and just protection. And I need to be that for her.
How does that make you feel, like now that you look at it now, right? Obviously during that moment, you made the decision because you knew you had to, right? But I hear you say that once you got to the shelter, life wasn't comfortable because the environment wasn't comfortable for you. You begin to make some shift. You begin to get some resources. So you begin to, I'm sure, get a little bit more clarity, a little bit more self-esteem about yourself. So when you look at it at that point, tell me about that mom that finally said, I was able to do it. And I did this for not just her, but you also did it for yourself, and you did it for those that will come thereafter, because I hear you say you're breaking the cycle. So tell me about that mom. What does that mom feel like, knowing that even throughout it all, that she can look and say, wow, I did this?
Yeah, it feels to look back and just and think about who I had to become in an instant. Like, it was like, I guess it was there the whole time, but it was just that catalyst, that moment that happened that just ignited like a new version of myself in the moment. And then that just carried on with the fire to just assert more for myself, assert more for her too. And yeah, just looking back, I'm like, man, that was hard. Like, I'm not going to put it lightly. It was hard. It was scary. I felt like I was walking in the dark and I had like a lantern. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'm so glad that I kept putting one foot in front of the other, even when it felt like I was living moment by moment at times. And now I'm like, I am so glad that I did not quit. I'm so glad that I just kept moving forward. I didn't look back. I didn't try to go back to him. So many women, unfortunately, try to go back, and it breaks my heart. And it's just like, I was so glad that I just cut that off and said, nope, that's it. I'm moving forward. And I did. And now I just look at my daughter. She's 12 now. And I'm like, I'm so thankful. Like, I am so thankful for who I became and that strength that I pulled out of me when I needed it the most, I feel like.
Throughout all of this, right? You left home at 17. You were in this relationship. You joined the military. You had a daughter. You hit another milestone. Throughout any of those years, did you ever have any contact with your family?
I did, yeah. It was kind of like after I went into the Army, I felt like they could be proud of me. So after I came home, and then my dad was really proud of me, and I felt really good. And so I had some family support there from him. And my relationship with my mom became pretty estranged. She was just not doing very good. I won't go into the details, but I became ironically closer to my dad after I went through the situation of the women's shelter. And I was trying to get a divorce and I didn't have the money. And I asked my dad, like, hey, can I just borrow, like $5,000 so I could just get a divorce and make sure that we're taken care of? And he lent me the money. And so I did have that support. But outside of that, I didn't really have much support from any family members or, emotional. Like, my dad's not really a touchy-feely guy. It's just like pretty cut and dry. And my mom's dealing with her own issues, so I didn't really have that support. So yeah, it was kind of like I didn't really have friends to lean on either. So I just had to kind of lean on myself a lot.
I understand. Again, sometimes we're stronger than what we give ourselves credit for. All right. And it sounds like to me that throughout all of this, each situation allowed you to become stronger, right? Each obstacle allowed you to say, okay, I've accomplished this obstacle. What's next? And when the next came, you were ready, because I heard you say that you just had to take it moment to moment, walking through a dark path with a little bit of light, but it was enough light to shine to say you could make it to the next step.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot that you can also provide to your daughter as she continues to grow, because again, you say she's 12. We all know what teenage life looks like, right? It is the life of the unknown for the child and for the parent. Yeah. And so I say that to ask this question, Heidi. Does your daughter know any of the things that, I'm not going to just say that you endured, but that she also endured as well, because she had to walk this with you?
She doesn't remember anything that she witnessed, thankfully. And he was seeing, because I still, through the courts, I still had to have contact. Like, she had to have contact with him because he never physically abused her or anything like that. So the court said he deserves to have rights. So she did form a relationship with him, and then it became estranged after a while. And now she's at the point she just doesn't want anything to do with him. So I think like she's been affected by that. But I also had, so after a year of, being separate from my husband and going through the divorce, and I met somebody new and it was casual. And then we kind of fell head over heels in love really quickly because he was just quite charming and the chemistry was just undeniable. And so she just started to, eventually, it wasn't like right away that I introduced them. I made sure to like keep them separate for a while, like at least 6 months or so, to keep that barrier and keep her protected and make sure like he was safe, to be around and things like that. And so he's formed this fatherly figure for her. So she was able to kind of have somebody there as a male figure for her.
So I hear you say that you met another man. He came into your life, and not only did he come into your life, but he also came into the life of your daughter, which oftentimes is important, right? It's important when, as single moms, we're just trying to figure it out, right? And I say that because I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to have this estranged relationship, or have this my children have a strange relationship, and you're just trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Right, here's another obstacle in my life. I'm trying to figure out, what do I do as a single parent? Because here's the reality. None of us have children to believe that we're going to be single parents. There's no book to being a parent, and there's sure in the hell ain't no book to being a single parent before we have kids. So all these things are new, right? And so here's another obstacle for you, but here's this gentleman who comes into your life. Tell us about that. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your family structure? Walk us through that.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was just like unexpected. And it was funny because we had both just gotten out of really bad relationships, and we had made this commitment that we weren't going to be in a relationship, but we ended up just, falling head over heels in love. And then it got to be about like 6 months or so. And then they started to spend time together, and they just started to form their own little like relationship. It was so cute. Like, she would just the way she would like look at him, and then just the bond that I could see that was being formed there. And we didn't call it because she was still seeing her biological father at that time. Like, I wasn't forcing her to say dad or anything like that. But eventually, like at least a year or so in, like they had this relationship, and she started calling him pops, and so he started to take on like the male role model for her. Right. And our family, and so it kind of just blossomed, and it was really sweet. And just to see him just dote on her and be what I wanted her to have as a father, basically what I didn't get, right? So I was so happy to see that she had that, and we had this, healthy family dynamic, and we went on adventures, and we have all this fun and stuff. But yeah, it was fun, and then it wasn't.
So take us there. It wasn't, but take us there. You stated that it wasn't fun anymore. Tell us, what does that mean?
It got to a point where, the chemistry, like I was explaining, was there. He treated me with love, respect. He treated me as a priority, but still, like, there was something under the surface that I couldn't quite pin. And I knew that he wasn't cheating on me or anything like that, but it was just like, I don't know, there's something there. And it turns out that in July 4th of 2020, I found out that he had a secret opiate addiction, where he nearly just died in my arms one day. And I was just like, oh my God. And so after getting to the hospital, figuring out what's going on, then that was kind of like, okay, now we need to have a serious conversation. Like, what, right. What's going on? And I had said to him, I understand, like, you have a past, like he grew up with a single mom who was abusive to him. And so I know that he was trying to escape the pain of that. Mm-hmm. And so I had compassion on him, and I said, listen, like, I will stay with you. Because I believe, like, I know your heart and I know your intentions and you're a good person, but I'm not going to have this in my life. And my daughter's certainly not going to be around this. And so he committed to changing. And so he went to therapy. He went to his doctor's appointments. He was on medications. He did all those things. And so he was showing me, like, this is, because I told him at one point, I was like, listen, I'm done listening to your words. I need to see action. Right. And so then he was showing me with his action, and so I could tell that he was getting better and better. So it was just like, as I was working on myself, because I hit that point again of being like, I gotta focus on me. I've been focusing on way too many other people, trying to take care of way too many other people, and I need to take care of me. And so as soon as I started to really focus on me, I was doing energy healing, I was doing coaching, I was doing all these different modalities to try to just heal myself and try to put myself in a better position. And it's like, as I started to grow self-love, that's really what it came down to. It was like, as I started to really love myself and give myself the love that I had been yearning from everybody else my entire life, like, I felt so fulfilled. And then it shifted our entire relationship to the point where he just started to like transform and blossom into like this amazing person. And, 2 years after that, and so fall of 2022, I was just looking at him. I'm like, wow, like I had written down everything I wanted in my partner, right? My relationship, like scripting. And I told him, I was like, you're everything I had written down. Like, you're that now. And he chuckled. But it was like, he wasn't perfect. No one's perfect. But the fact that like, he would self-analyze and be like, okay, how do I do better? We come together, have conversations, and he'd conversate with me and communicate things that we needed to fix and things that he wanted me to work on. And it's like, okay, that's how we elevate as a relationship. That's how we elevate as a couple, and being able to have that healthy communication. And growing up in the household that I grew up in, communication was like passive aggressive. And so trying to learn how to communicate in a healthy way was very hard. And I'm still working on it, but I'm better than I was a couple of years ago. Right. But yeah, so it was just a lot of growth.
So it sounded like you manifested what you deserved, what you wanted, and what you now have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really just what I would tell anybody out there. It all comes down to loving you. You have to love yourself first before you can live the life that you want, before you can have that love that you want from somebody else. Be that for you first.
So I'll ask you this question, right? And I'm asking this solely because if there's a listener, he or she may be asking this question as well. You say love yourself, right? I know those are love yourself. 3 words was real easy for me to say, but yet not always so easy for people to do. What would be Heidi's advice to someone? How do one begin to love themselves?
It's funny because as you're speaking about this, forgiveness is coming up. It's so crucial to being able to forgive. And I struggled with that concept for a while when people were talking about forgiveness. And like, how can I forgive my family? How can I forgive my ex? How can I forgive all these people? But the moment that I heard this mindset, like shifted for me, was just like, it's not about condoning what they did. It's about letting yourself be free from it. And it's like releasing the change, because when we aren't forgiving or resentful or we're angry about it, we're stuck in like this invisible prison. We have like these shackles on us. And it's as soon as we allow ourselves to forgive others and ourselves for who we were being, it's like we are able to release those shackles. And so I would say like that's one of the most foundational pieces to loving yourself, is being able to just be at peace with just you and everything that happened. And then just learning about yourself too. Like, who are you? What do you like doing? What are your values? Get really clear on who you are and start to really build an appreciation for yourself and what the value you have just being you.
I think you brought up a good point that sometimes people misunderstand, and that's the word forgiveness, right? Not only do they misunderstand the word, they misunderstand the concept of what that means, right? And I think you said it very beautifully. It's not just about forgiving individuals who have harmed you. The forgiveness is for yourself, right? The forgiveness doesn't mean that you're going to forget anything that happened, but you're no longer allowing those things, whatever those things may be, to have you shackled in a place of a prison in your own mind, a prison in your own heart, and a prison within the chaos of everything that's been out of your control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That is the key to forgiveness. And again, I ask that question because I know sometimes that's very hard for people to truly understand, especially if the cycle has been going on forever, from generation to generation. Sometimes people just think this is the way it's supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to expect because this is what I saw going on around me. And it's important to figure out, how does one begin to break a cycle that they didn't even ask to be in, right? How do you gain control of a new cycle? And like you said, you wanted something different for your daughter. You said, not today. This can't be. And I need something new. And so that's why I asked the question of, how does one begin to love themselves? And I think the key word is forgiveness. And that does take some work. It ain't easy, right?
No.
It's not easy at all. One of the things I often say, Heidi, when I go out and speak or I come on my podcast, is that in order to change, that's the key. You're going to have to deal with some uncomfortable stuff, right? If we stay stuck in our comfort, even though sometimes that comfort doesn't feel good, but if we stay stuck in our comfort, nothing would ever change as far as what we deserve. But when we begin to identify what makes us uncomfortable and begin doing the work, which is going to be uncomfortable, that's how change begins. And that's how forgiveness begins as well, because you start to deal with all the things that have been out of your control, but you're finally saying, I'm going to get control of this because I want control of my life, because you deserve control of your life. Yeah. So Heidi, as we are getting closer to the end of the episode, I must ask you this question, because we may have someone today that is thinking about running away from home, right? Who may be 17. We may have someone that's listening, as we stated earlier, who may be in a domestic violence relationship. But we're going to talk back. But I want to talk back to that 17-year-old little girl. If you were able to go back and talk to her, if you were able to go back and go talk to her, what would you say to her?
Just be fearless. Just keep advocating for yourself, because no one's going to understand you better than you, and no one's going to see your journey better than you. And to just keep fighting. You're worthy, you're loved, you're lovable, and just don't ever give up on you.
Thank you for that. And I asked that question for this reason. Not only would your words resonate with a 17-year-old who's chronologically 17 years old today, it will also resonate with someone who's stuck at that 17-year-old stage, even though they may be much older, right? Because what happens with trauma is that trauma keeps us stuck where the trauma occurred. So there may be someone that's listening right now that's 54 years old, that's thinking back to all the things that he or she may have had to go through at 17, and they find themselves stuck still there mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually at some point, right? And so that's why I asked, what would you tell your 17-year-old self? And I hope that there's someone that is listening today and you find that you are in that place, that hopefully something that Heidi has said today will allow you to know that you deserve better, right? You deserve to be loved, and you deserve to love yourself. And so I hope that there's something, or if not all, right? I hope that all of what Heidi said today has resonated with you. But what we know is that if we can touch somebody, you've made a difference. You've made a difference. And so, Heidi, I want to thank you today for being on Heart to Heart with Keisha B. And my last question I always ask, and this may be a redundant question, right, in regards to what your last answer was. But if there was one message, one heart-to-heart message you would share with the audience today, what would that be?
You have the power to create your own reality. You just have to have the strength to assert it and fight for that. And just know that you're lovable. And just know that you deserve to have an amazing life.
There's not much more I can say. I think Heidi has summed up, how does one overcome circumstances that they didn't ask for, right? And so as always, I want to thank you for listening today to Heart with Keisha B. And as always, you can find me on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, or Pandora. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode today, and I ask that you please share and continue to support Heart with Keisha B. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning into Heart to Heart with Keisha B. Remember, grief may shape our journey, but it doesn't define who we are. Healing is not a straight path, but with every step forward, you're creating space for hope, strength, and new beginnings. If today's episode brought you comfort or clarity, share it with someone who might need it too. Let's continue building this community of compassion and resilience together. Until next time, take care of your heart, your mind, and your soul. Honor your journey and always know that brighter days are ahead. I am Keisha B, and this has been Heart to Heart.